March 21, 1993, the 65th Academy Awards. Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, Los Angeles. 40 million people watching what they thought would be a celebration of cinema's greatest achievements. Everything had been flawless, elegant, predictable. Nobody knew that backstage Kirk Douglas was watching a monitor with his hands clenched into fists. The Best Director category, 5 nominees, and Clint Eastwood for Unforgiven. Kirk's jaw tightened when they said Clint's name. Unforgiven, a cowboy picture dressed up as prestige cinema, and the Academy was eating it up. Kirk had been in Hollywood for 50 years. Champion Lust for Life Spartacus. He'd bled for his art. The famous chin scar from a helicopter accident. That was dedication. And now they were giving Best Director to Clint Eastwood, a television actor who got lucky in spaghetti westerns. Kirk's assistant, Jennifer, noticed his expression. "Mr. Douglas, are you okay?" He didn't answer, just stared as they opened the envelope. And the Oscar goes to Clint Eastwood, Unforgiven. The audience erupted. Clint rose, humble and composed, and walked to the stage. Kirk stood up. Jennifer stepped back, startled. "Mr. Douglas, this is wrong," Kirk said quietly. But underneath something was boiling. Jennifer recognized the signs. The legendary Douglas temper. Kirk walked toward the stage wings past surprised stagehands where he could see Clint at the podium holding his Oscar beginning his acceptance speech. And Kirk Douglas, 76 years old, one of Hollywood's last legends, made a decision that would shock the world. Clint stood at the podium holding the Oscar. Heavier than you'd think. The audience still applauding, he waited for them to settle, looked out at Meyer Street, Jack Nicholson, Gene Hackman, grinning from his seat. This was his moment. Best Director. The Academy acknowledging he wasn't just an action star. He was a filmmaker. "I want to thank the Academy for this incredible honor. When I started directing with Play Misty, for me, I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew I had stories to tell." The audience laughed. Warm, appreciative. Backstage, Kirk wasn't laughing. He watched Clint accept an award Kirk had never received, never even been nominated for. Kirk had acted in over 90 films, produced, directed, but the Academy had never recognized him as a director. And now Clint Eastwood was holding a Best Director Oscar. Jennifer caught up to Kirk. "Mr. Douglas, please. You can't what? Can't speak the truth. You're upset." But walking out there would be honest for once. A stagehand noticed Kirk. "Mr. Douglas, can I help you?" Kirk ignored him. Turned back to watch Clint. "This film means everything to me." Clint was saying, "It's about violence and its consequences, about men trying to find redemption. I wanted to make something honest, something real." That word real. Kirk felt something snap. Real. A cowboy picture was real. Method actors who spent months preparing that was real. Not this. Not showing up, squinting at the camera and calling it directing. Clint continued. "I want to thank my cast. Gene Hackman, Morgan Freeman, Francis Pfizer, cinematographer Jack Green, editor Joel Cox, who's been with me 20 years. He paused, looked at the Oscar. "This doesn't belong to me alone. It belongs to everyone who believed in this story." The audience was rapt. "When I started out, I learned the most important thing wasn't the size of your role. It was truth. Being truthful, serving the story. That's what I've tried to do as a director. Get out of the way. Let the actors find the truth." Backstage, Kirk's hands were shaking. Not from age, from rage. Get out of the way. These were words of someone who didn't understand real directing. Real directing was Kubrick demanding a 100 takes. Hitchcock planning every shot, not this passive approach. That wasn't directing. Jennifer touched Kirk's arm. "Please, Mr. Douglas." Kirk looked at her. She was young. She didn't understand. She didn't remember the old Hollywood where actors trained in theater, where you earned your place through dedication. "I have to," Kirk said quietly. "Someone has to say it." He stepped forward. The stagehand tried to intercept him. "Mr. Douglas, you can't." Kirk brushed past him. 76 years old and still powerful. He walked onto the Oscar stage. 40 million people watched as Kirk Douglas appeared from the wings and headed straight for Clint Eastwood. The audience noticed Kirk first, a ripple of confusion. Why was Kirk Douglas walking onto the stage? Clint looked up, saw Kirk approaching, just a slight raise of the eyebrow. Kirk reached the podium, stood next to Clint. Close. Too close. The audience's confusion turned to concern. Billy Crystal stood up, started toward the stage. Security was converging, but this was Kirk Douglas, a legend. Kirk leaned toward the microphone. "Forgive me for interrupting." Clint stepped back slightly, still holding his Oscar, calm, waiting. "I've been in this business for 50 years, Kirk continued. His voice steady, but with an edge. I've watched Hollywood change, watched standards slip, watched real artistry replaced by convenience. The audience was dead silent. "Clint, I'm sure you're proud of your Western, but standing here accepting this award when you've never studied the craft, never trained, never paid the dues." He paused, looked at Clint, then the audience. "This is a joke. I can't watch the Academy give the highest honor in film making to someone who doesn't understand what real directing is." The auditorium gasped. Clint stood there, expression unchanged, just watching, listening. Kirk turned to face him directly. "You're a movie star, a successful one, but directing requires more than showing up and letting the camera roll. It requires vision, preparation, understanding that takes years." He pointed at the Oscar. "That belongs to real directors, not cowboys." Kirk's finger was inches from Clint's chest, pointing, accusing. His face was red. Not just anger but jealousy, pain. 50 years of watching younger actors succeed where he'd struggled. Security was moving. 2 men approaching but hesitant. This was Kirk Douglas. Billy Crystal was signaling to the control booth. Cut to commercial, but the cameras kept rolling. 40 million people watching Kirk Douglas call Clint's Oscar undeserved. "You want to talk about real directing?" Kirk's voice rising. "Stanley Kubrick, Hitchcock, Ford. Those men suffered for their art. They didn't just show up and squint." The audience was in shock. Mariel Street looked horrified. Lapel, not violently, but aggressive, confrontational. "You don't deserve this," Kirk said, voice dropping to a whisper, but the microphone caught it. "You haven't earned it." That's when Clint finally moved. Not aggressively. He simply took one step back, created space. Kirk's hand fell away, and Clint spoke for the first time since Kirk stormed the stage. "Kirk." Just one word. Calm. Even not angry. Not intimidated. The entire auditorium leaned forward. Clint looked at Kirk. Really. Looked at him. Not with anger. With something like understanding. "Kirk," he repeated. "I think you should sit down." Kirk's face went redder. "Don't tell me to sit down. I'm not patronizing you. I'm trying to save you from something you're going to regret tomorrow." The 2 men stood facing each other. Kirk breathing hard, face flushed. Clint holding his Oscar, completely calm. Security had reached the stage, but didn't know what to do. Billy Crystal stepped on stage, tried humor. "Gentlemen, I think Westerns are underrated." Kirk turned on him. "This isn't a joke. This is about the integrity of filmmaking." Billy stepped back. Clint remained at the podium. He could have left, but he didn't. He stood his ground. "Kirk," Clint said, voice calm, "I respect everything you've done. I grew up watching your films. Champion was one of the first movies that made me want to act." Kirk's expression flickered. The anger wavered. "But this," Clint gestured at the stage, "this isn't the way to make your point." "Then what is?" Kirk's voice cracked. "How do I make people understand that real artistry is dying?" The audience was transfixed. Kirk Douglas having what looked like a breakdown on live television. Clint took a breath, set his Oscar down, gave Kirk his full attention. "You're right about one thing. Film making has changed. The studio system doesn't exist anymore. But that doesn't make what we do now any less valid." Kirk shook his head. "You don't understand. I understand that you're angry. I understand you feel the industry you helped build has left you behind. but attacking me on this stage isn't going to change that. The silence was deafening. Clint had just said what everyone knew, but nobody would say. Kirk Douglas was angry because the world had moved on without him. Kirk's mouth opened, closed, his hands dropped to his sides. Clint continued, voice never rising, just steady, honest. You've had an incredible career. Films that will be remembered forever. But trying to tear down my accomplishment because you're frustrated with your own doesn't honor your legacy. It diminishes it. That hit Kirk like a physical blow. Anger draining away, replaced by shame. I didn't study at a conservatory, Clint continued. I didn't train in method acting. I learned by doing, by watching directors like Siegel and Leon. Is that less valid? You say yes. I say it's just different. Kirk tried to speak. I didn't mean you meant exactly what you said. You think I don't deserve this Oscar. You're entitled to that opinion, but you're not entitled to attack me on this stage in front of the entire industry. Clint picked up his Oscar. This doesn't just represent me. It represents every person who worked on Unforgiven. When you say I don't deserve this, you're saying they don't deserve recognition. That's not fair. Kirk's eyes were glistening. Not quite tears, but close. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Clint nodded. I know you are. He extended his hand. Kirk looked at it, then took it. They shook hands while 40 million people watched. Security backed off. Billy Crystal exhaled. Clint turned to the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, Kirk Douglas, one of the greatest actors in Hollywood history. He started clapping. Slowly, the audience joined in. Kirk stood there, hands still in Clint's, looking lost. Clint released Kirk's hand. Go sit down, Kirk. We'll talk later. Kirk nodded, walked off the stage with dignity. Still, Kirk Douglas. The audience applauded, respectful, but uncomfortable. Clint turned back to the podium, picked up where he'd left off as if nothing had happened. As I was saying, this award belongs to everyone who believed in this story. Thank you all. He held up the Oscar, walked off. The audience gave him another standing ovation, not just for the film, for how he'd handled what just happened. Backstage, Kirk was surrounded by people. Jennifer, his publicist, an Academy official. Are you all right? We need damage control. Kirk ignored them, walked to his green room, sat down, put his head in his hands. 40 million people had just watched him attack Clint Eastwood. Watched him make a fool of himself. Heard Clint respond with more grace than Kirk had shown. In the press room, journalists were going insane. Did you see that? Why did he do it? Clint arrived backstage with his Oscar. Gene Hackman pulled him into a hug. You okay? I'm fine. That was incredible what you said. I just told the truth. You could have destroyed him. You chose not to. Clint shrugged. What would be the point? The next morning, every newspaper led with the same story. Kirk Douglas attacks Eastwood at Oscars. Hollywood legends meltdown. The footage played everywhere. Entertainment Tonight. CNN. Every news network. Kirk didn't leave his house for 3 days. On the 4th day, he released a statement. I want to apologize to Clint Eastwood, to the Academy, and to everyone who watched. My behavior was inexcusable. I let my frustration override my judgment. Clint handled the situation with more grace than I deserved. He is a talented director, and his Oscar was well earned. I'm deeply sorry. The statement was sincere, humble. Clint was asked about it during a press conference. Kirk called me personally to apologize. I accepted. As far as I'm concerned, it's over. Do you think he was jealous? Clint paused. I think he was having a moment. We all have them. His just happened to be on national television. The audience laughed, but privately people who knew Kirk said he was devastated. The man who'd built a reputation as Hollywood royalty had tarnished it in 5 minutes. His son, Michael, called. Dad, everyone makes mistakes. Not like this. Not in front of 40 million people. You apologized. Clint accepted. It's time to move on. But Kirk couldn't. The image of himself on that stage, finger-pointing, face red, played in his mind constantly. He'd become what he'd feared. A bitter old man who couldn't accept change. 6 months later, Kirk Douglas did something unprecedented. He attended the premiere of Clint's next film, In the Line of Fire. Showed up uninvited, waited in line. When Clint saw him, he walked over immediately. "Kirk, you didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did." They talked for 20 minutes away from cameras. Two men from different eras of Hollywood. "I watched Unforgiven again," Kirk said. "Really watched it. It's a masterpiece." "Thank you. I was wrong about everything I said that night." Clint put his hand on Kirk's shoulder. "You weren't wrong about everything. Hollywood has changed. Sometimes not for the better, but change isn't always decline." Kirk nodded. "I just wanted what you have. That Oscar. You have recognition. You have respect. You have a legacy most actors would kill for. One bad night doesn't erase 50 years of brilliance." When Kirk Douglas died in 2020 at 103, obituaries mentioned the Oscar incident, but also his incredible work, his contributions to cinema. And they mentioned how Clint Eastwood had responded with grace, how instead of destroying Kirk, Clint had shown mercy. The Oscar confrontation became a teaching moment about jealousy, about aging, about handling conflict with grace. Clint never spoke about it publicly again. When asked, he'd just say, "Kirk was a legend. One moment doesn't define a life." The footage still circulates, still gets millions of views. But those who knew both men understood the truth. Kirk attacked Clint not because Clint didn't deserve his Oscar, but because Kirk felt he deserved one too. Clint's response left 40 million people stunned, not because it was cruel, but because it was kind. Sometimes the strongest response is the gentlest.